This is Tuesday, August 17th, 2021. This is the meeting of the Woodland City Council. It is again being conducted pursuant to the governor's executive order, which has been continued by action of the legislature, and this emergency, which allows us to do this meeting electronically. We invite participation from members of the public. You can either call into the meeting, you can email us, or you can send something to us to be read by our clerk at the meeting, perhaps along with an email. If you wonder how to do that, the details you'll find on the agenda itself, available at cityofwoodland.org. Click on agendas and meetings. For the meeting tonight, you'll find the agenda is available there with those instructions. With that, Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Yes, Mayor Pro Tem Vega.
Present.
Councilmember Fernandez.
Present.
Councilmember Garcia Cadena.
Present.
Councilmember Landsberg.
Present.
Mayor Stallard.
Present. Thank you. That means we've got a full council here tonight, and we'll move on over to the Pledge of Allegiance. And I'd like to ask Craig Locke, our Director of Public Works. Craig, would you lead us in the pledge tonight, please? You need to unmute yourself.
Yeah. All right. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much, Craig.
Thanks.
All right. We can now move on to communications. This is public comment time, and if we have members of the public who wish to comment on something not otherwise on the agenda tonight, this would be the time to speak up. Madam Clerk, has anyone requested to be heard?
We have a voicemail message. And Mayor Stallard, I just wanted to let you know, this is an email that keeps, somebody sends it at every council meeting. So I just went ahead and recorded the email so that Jay can just play it back.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The usage of speed limits on public roads has increased traffic congestion, decreased roadway safety, and reduced property values and economic output. This policy has made public roads less helpful in transporting people, freight, and other necessities. This inefficiency is due to the lower speeds at which vehicles can transport people and freight and the increase in traffic congestion. In addition, the roadway is less safe because of speed limits, and it increases the likelihood of accidents. Speed limit signage, especially those displaying a lower numerical value, diminishes neighboring properties, aesthetics affecting businesses, individuals, and commercial and residential property values. The speed limits have also reduced the economic output of businesses and individuals, making it less cost competitive to do business or reside in areas with speed limits. Policymakers should have speed limits withdrawn. Please remove speed limits on public roads. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Is there any other items for us to hear tonight?
No.
All right. If that's the case, we'll conclude public comment and we'll move on to communications from the council and statements from our council. And Vicki, would you like to lead us off tonight? Okay. This is Councilman Fernandez.
Thank you, Mayor Stallard. Sorry. Good evening. Just want to remind everyone that our advisory Redistricting Commission will begin community workshops starting November 8th. The first one will be held at the Douglas Cafeteria, 6 o'clock on November 8th. That's Monday. And the next one will be on Saturday, November 20th. If you can't attend the first one, it'll be at 10 o'clock at the Community and Senior Center. So if you're interested in putting your input into or learning about the process for the redistricting, please participate. And also, I'd like to address an issue with the residents of Thomas Street. Met with Mr. Lopez on October 25th. He had just experienced a tragic or a serious accident in front of his home. His vehicle, his truck was moved probably about 20 feet down the road when it was hit by an oncoming speeding vehicle who rammed into the back end of his vehicle. Fortunately, his vehicle was parked in front of his residence, which kept anyone from having any physical harm or the vehicle entering anyone's home. Would just like to remind the staff that the Thomas Strait residents have been addressing this issue to the city since 2002. Unfortunately, it is very frustrating for them to have to undergo another incident. Waiting another 18 months is really something that I would like the city staff to review and address and take these concerns seriously. I am concerned about the safety of the residents, and I hope that nothing no one is physically injured, but I think that we need to take this very seriously. So they have been trying to work with city staff. I know Chief Kraft was there and met with Mr. Lopez also, and Mr. Crumpacker. So I appreciate him taking the time, and I just want us to look at that area and really look at what we can do to address that issue. On a personal note, I would just like to thank Yolo County Supervisors Gary Sandy and Angel Barajas for closing the Board of Supervisor meeting in memory of my father, Delfino Macias, this last meeting. And thank you for acknowledging his service to our community. And that's it for me today. Thank you.
Thank you, Council Member Fernandez. Council Member Tanya Garcia Cadena.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I was able to attend the Dia de Muertos celebration this last Friday that was held by in the garden, put on by the Dinner on Main crew. And I thought it was very well attended. And I would like in the future for the city to possibly see if we could maybe partner with them and grow that event. I think it would make a really nice community event. And that's that one. I also wanted to congratulate our 3 varsity football teams. Woodland High, Pioneer High, and Woodland Christian School have all qualified for the CIF Sac Joaquin football playoffs. So that's wonderful. And then also, I would like to commend our police department for their great work. Just, I was watching the news today at lunch, and I heard Woodland PD, Woodland Police, and they were talking about the robberies that they were able to intervene on last night. And so just, our police department, along with our partnering law enforcement agencies, are doing an incredible job. And so thank you very much. That's it, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councilmember Garcia Cadena. Councilmember Rich Landsberg.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I wanted to add a little bit as to what Councilmember Fernandez said about the Redistricting Committee. One of the things they're concerned about is the lack of public participation. I viewed their meeting last night, and they are quite concerned that not many people are stepping up to the plate. This is a very, very critical component of our democratic process. So hopefully we'll see some people at the first event at Douglas Middle School next Monday night. It's important for you to turn out and participate in that very important democratic process. You can also go to the city's website and look at the bright orange link, Our Community, Your Voice, and find very useful information about the process and maps. And there'll be a tool, I think it's going to be interactive sometime this week, that you can actually use the interactive GIS maps. Is that correct, Mr. Hyatt? This week sometime?
That is correct. I, in fact, believe that link is now up and live and active on the website.
Great, thank you. Last week at the Yolo County Housing Commission, where I sit, we hosted a joint session with the Yolo County folks as well as the Dixon Housing Authority, where we invited and heard from the state's Housing and Community Development Director, Gustavo Velasquez, and his staff regarding new rounds of state funding for much needed improvements and repairs at our area's migrant housing facilities. These folks who work in the farm industry need decent, clean, affordable seasonal rental housing in order to do the work that we end up being the beneficiaries of. We're not talking about luxuries here, folks. We're talking about roofing that certainly failed at the last go around of rain, heating and air conditioning. These are simple things that you and I take for granted. Lastly, Mr. Mayor, I met with members of the Woodland Tree Foundation who have really good ideas about our upcoming review and amendments to our tree ordinance that we'll be looking at here relatively soon. It is refreshing to hear from these very dedicated individuals who have such tremendous passion to not only preserve our heritage trees, but to provide assistance as we manage our urban forest. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That's all I have.
Thank you, Councilmember Landsberg. And now, lest I forget her again, it's Mayor Pro Tem Myra Vega's turn. Myra.
Thank you, Mayor Stoller. No, you can't forget me again, because then I'd be upset. Thank you. Just for me, I wanted to thank Chief Caff and Morgan for helping the newest District 5 Neighborhood Watch program led by Harry Blount. I really appreciate the efforts going on within the city, and specifically in District 5. We have some close-knit neighborhoods that are willing to step up to ensure that neighborhood is secure. So thank you for doing that. I hope we continue to see more of these pop up. I think if we all work together, we can ensure that our families, our neighbors are all safe. Additionally, I wanted to just call out the participation in the redistricting process. I think it's important. Take some time to listen into the meetings. I found for myself participating, listening in, and then you get the gist for what the ask and what the impacts are. So I would encourage folks to participate. And lastly, I wanted to remind folks from District 5 about my community discussions that are going to happen next Saturday. At Rick Gonzalez Park. That's the second Saturday of November. This is a series of community discussions that I've started in collaboration with Ken and staff to discuss issues that the neighborhood is having, addressing them, and identifying them so we can pull together some resources or support. That'll be all for myself, Mayor Stoller. Thank you.
I didn't hear a time for your meeting next Saturday.
Oh, yes, thank you. It's at 9:30, Rick Gonzalez Park.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Vega. For myself, just some routine meetings, but we did at the Woodland Davis Clean Water Agency, Councilmember Landsberg and I represent our city there, and we did okay the purchase of additional fresh water from the Nature Conservancy to help supplement our needs while we're curtailed from some of the water we normally rely upon from the Sacramento River. That's a very positive step, and I commend Mr. Tim Bush for facilitating that purchase. Sacramento Area Council of Governments has met, Valley Clean Energy has met, mostly routine meetings. Mayor Pro Tem Vega and I met with staff on community development issues. Still lots of positive things moving forward in the community, and we'll all be hearing more about some of them soon. Also, the president of the League of California Cities asked me to join a small task force on Assembly Constitutional Amendment 7. This is a proposal by a member of the legislature that would allow cities to essentially trump state laws when they conflict with land use authority of the cities. It needs a lot of work, but we're trying to protect the authority of cities while recognizing the legitimate needs for more housing and other issues facing our state. For my Mayor's Minute, I really haven't prepared anything tonight, but I would just like to say that I feel like we on the council should be in solidarity with our school board. Those folks are serving just like we do. They don't get paid anything to speak of, and they really put their hearts out for the kids in our community. And they're being attacked pretty roundly by some members of the community, those who oppose vaccination, those who oppose mask wearing in the schools. It's a bit of an organized activity. And one school board member was followed out to her car and harassed. Another member of the board was basically harassed while making a purchase at a local store when one of these folks came up behind him. I just don't feel that's healthy or necessary. And I just want our school board to know that if they're being attacked like this, we should regard ourselves as being attacked. It isn't right. And I'm grateful to know that 2 members of our Woodland police force were at their last meeting, which lasted 5 hours, to help provide security for those who serve on the school board. And that's it for me. Mr. Manager?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Nothing notable really to report this week, other than I do want to echo the council members' comments regarding the advisory redistricting commission process and the next phase of that process, which will be the all-important public input opportunities. So I encourage folks throughout the community to really tune in to this. It's important to their representation here in the community. I also want to just call attention to the 5 commissioners that you appointed and just acknowledge their dedication and commitment to this effort. They have really stepped up, in my opinion, and put their full effort and energy and attention into this. So I just want to acknowledge those 5 members of the commission and their effort that they put in so far. Real quick, with respect to the long range calendar, I do want to call attention to your next meeting on the 19th. The council will be asked to consider amendments to its commercial cannabis ordinance, which was adopted several years ago. There are proposed amendments to that ordinance for council consideration that would potentially allow retail sales in the community. This proposed ordinance amendment has gone through the Council Planning Commission Subcommittee on cannabis, as well as had a hearing at the Planning Commission. So this will be the last touch point for the council to consider these potential amendments. You will also at that meeting be receiving a quarterly update on the budget. So we'll again report on how we wrapped up last year and how we're trending for this year in the budget. So that is all for my report this evening, Mr. Mayor. Thank you very much.
And thank you, Mr. Manager. I would like to add a couple additional things. First of all, we staged a groundbreaking this afternoon for our pedestrian overpass and bikeway spanning 113, which I think is such an exciting development. You know, this is a uniting and connecting opportunity for our community, whether you live west or east of Highway 113, which bisects the entire city. So it's a very progressive step. I'm really happy. It's all in Mayor Pro Tem Vega's council district, but I think in the future, everyone will appreciate the fact that they have this additional area. The other thing I'd like to call my colleagues' attention to, in fact, everybody in the city should be paying attention, is the statewide redistricting commission has been at work, and they've put out 2 series of what they call visualizations. And what these are rough outlines of what could be assembly districts, state senate districts, and congressional districts in response to the 2020 census. So the second set of visualizations were just posted today. The first set were absolutely horrid in my view. It put all of Yolo County in a Senate district and congressional district as the south end of districts that extended all the way to the Oregon border and east to the northern Nevada border. In other words, we were being lumped in basically for the population necessary, but we really don't have communities of interest with most of the people in those very rural areas of our state. The assembly district was more acceptable, but it, for one reason or other, excluded the city of Winters. And I suspect that's because they needed 7,000 bodies to put in another district next to it. Well, they're up to the second set and they're getting a little more reasonable, but it's still Yolo County wrapping around the Sacramento region, not really part of the Sacramento region. So if you're of a mind to take a look at those visualizations, you can tap a comment to them and you can call in during their next meeting, which is coming up in a couple of days. And again, we're going to live with those districts. We're going to live with the people who represent us in those new districts. So it's important that we feel that whoever represents us in those districts have our interests at heart. And it's more reasonable to expect it'll be the case if it's the kind of part of the Sacramento region. All right, that concludes all the public comment and staff comment. The long-range calendar has been discussed. We move now to the consent calendar, items 2 through 7. Does any member of the council need to recuse themselves or wish to remove for independent discussion any item on the consent calendar? Right.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, sir.
I would just like to call out F3, and I'd be happy to read that proclamation and not just pass it in consent.
Yes, we will get to that as soon as we've adopted it. I thank you for bringing it up. And just check and make sure we got everything here. All right. We now have a motion by Councilmember Landsberg. And is there a second to adopt the consent calendar?
Fernandez.
Councilmember Fernandez seconds Councilmember Landsberg's motion to adopt items 2 through 7. Madam Clerk, please call the roll. Oh, first of all, is there any public comment on any of these items, Madam Clerk?
No public comment.
Thank you. Please call the roll.
Mayor Pro Tem Vega,
Aye.
Councilmember Fernandez,
Aye.
Councilmember Garcia Cadena,
Aye.
Councilmember Landsberg,
Aye.
Mayor Stallard.
Aye. Thank you. And now we do have an important resolution tonight. It's really important to recognize our Native American heritage here in Yolo County. All of us were essentially part of Indian country at one time. And the Indians today, the Yochadihi people, are still wonderful colleagues and friends and fellow citizens. So with that, I'd be grateful, Councilmember Landsberg, if you would read the proclamation that I have now signed in response to the vote we just took.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's my pleasure. Whereas the Native American Heritage Month has been established at the national and state levels with proclamations and celebrations to recognize the diverse cultures, traditions, histories, significant contributions, and present-day lives of Native Americans. Whereas the city of Woodland, established in 1871, within an area of California that represented the unceded territory of our indigenous people known as the Patwin, in some languages it's Patween, or Southern Wintun. Whereas the earliest historic written records of the Patwins, which literally means people in their native tribal language, begins with the Spanish mission explorations and registers, and ethno-historic records show the Patwins inhabited the lower hills of the eastern North Coast ranges to the Sacramento River, and from Princeton south to the San Pablo and Suisun Bays. Whereas, like most indigenous people throughout the United States, the Patwins were forced from their ancestral lands onto rancherias during the early 1900s, where they currently reside as citizens of 3 sovereign, federally recognized tribal governments, today known as the Yochadihi Wintun Nation, Quetzaldihi Band of Wintun Indians, and Kachildihi Band of Wintun Indians. Whereas the city of Woodland is to be acknowledged as historical Patwin territory out of respect for the Patwin people as original stewards of this land upon which this city, county, schools has thrived. Whereas the city of Woodland has a meaningful government-to-government relationship with the Yochadihi Wintun Nation and works in partnerships to address the needs of the community and improve the lives of people who live within their respective jurisdictions today. Whereas Native people have made and continue to make distinct and significant contributions in many fields, including academic scholarship, agriculture, astronomy, art, business, education, ecology, engineering, environmentalism, economics, forestry, government, irrigation systems, language, leadership, literature, math, medicine, our military, our music, our politics, poetry, science, and traditional systems. Whereas the designation of Native American Heritage Month will encourage educational institutions in the city of Woodland to enhance their understanding of Native Americans by providing accurate curriculum, focusing on the local Patwin tribes, as well as the historical and contemporary achievements and contributions of Native Americans. Whereas the city of Woodland thoroughly discourages any and all forms of racial slurs, names, or any imagery that depicts Indigenous peoples as mascots or logos in educational institutions or sports teams or any other organization within this city and county. Whereas the city of Woodland will encourage its citizens to acknowledge and celebrate November as Native American Heritage Month every year to foster education, relationships, and cooperation with our Native people while supporting social and economic opportunities for them within the city of Woodland. Now, therefore, we, the council members, on behalf of all citizens of Woodland, hereby proclaim November as Native American Heritage Month in the city of Woodland. And in doing so, the city of Woodland will recognize and observe Native American Heritage Month in November by encouraging its public institutions and organizations to recognize Native American Heritage Month. Additionally, the city of Woodland will commit itself to promote the health, safety, and well-being of Woodland's Indigenous and Native American populations, as demonstrated by acknowledging this Native American Heritage Month. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
And thank you, Councilmember Landsberg. I'd like to add a comment here. When I entered public office in 1995 as a Yolo County supervisor, our local tribe, Yochidihi, operated a bingo hall on their land and a steel building, corrugated steel building. And to see their progress in the years since, but also the responsible way in which they've responded to the needs of the larger community is something we can be so grateful for and proud of. And take note of and incorporate into our own behaviors. So I'm really, really grateful that we have the Yochidihi tribe here in Yolo County, and long may they succeed. Anyone else have any comments on this before we move along? I'm sure we're of one mind on this issue. All right, we're going to move along. We have only 2 items in the report to the city manager, but I think in view of the fact we have our fire chief here, he's here every week. Chief, I'd like you just to kind of give us a little update on your operation before we move into this critical item on fireworks. Can you just take maybe 3 to 5 minutes and tell us how things are in the operational side of our fire service?
Sure, absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I know our quarterly report will be sitting in front of you this next meeting. But currently, the Woodland Fire Department sits in a position to where we're responding to 15% higher, greater call volume this year over last, meaning that we're probably going to hit close to 9,000 calls for service this year, which is a significant increase year over year that we're seeing in our community. The fire department is currently in a hiring process. We're hiring 3 new employees to be firefighters within the city of Woodland. I'm very happy with our current hiring process, and those individuals are in backgrounds at this time. We're also in recruitment for a prevention or community risk reduction specialist. So there's a lot of growth and change within our organization. We spent quite a bit of time this summer on wildland deployments, and I'll share with the council some additional statistics at our next meeting. With that, today, in fact, we had a residential structure fire with a victim that was removed, and we're very hopeful that they'll make a recovery. But it's still a concern and an issue in our city and in our residential neighborhoods. And we try to get out and do a good, thorough job of inspecting our commercial businesses and also educating our residents on safe practices within their home. So that continues to be a mainstay within the fire department, especially with our community outreach and public education. So I know this next item on the agenda, is important to all of us as citizens here in Woodland and to council to move forward and trying to address some of the fireworks related issues that we have in our own community. So I know we're excited to bring you this first reading and hopeful that we receive some positive comments from the community moving forward, and that we can start to curtail some of the illegal firework activity in our community.
Thank you, Chief. Please convey to all of your troops how grateful we are for the service they provide to our citizens. Okay?
Thank you. Will do.
All right, Mr. Manager, do you want to introduce item 8 that the chief has referenced? Okay.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. As the chief mentioned, right, Woodland, like probably most communities, I guess now throughout the state of California, has seen a significant increase in the use of illegal firework ordinances. Traditionally around 4th of July, but even throughout the year and New Year's Eve as well. And not only do these illegal fireworks, pose a nuisance to our residents in this community, but certainly pose a significant health and safety risk. As a result, as Chief Zane indicated, we're seeing an increase in response calls for service, both in fire, but also in the police department. These are residents calling in concerned about the illegal activity and their safety. And it's really putting a strain on our resources around these holiday seasons, which we would obviously be preferred to have our staff positioned to respond to other incidences. So with that, council earlier this year asked that we investigate ways that we can better enforce and better control the use of these illegal fireworks around these times and throughout the year. So we asked Chief Zane and Chief Kaff to jointly investigate what other cities are implementing throughout the state and evaluate whether those ordinances are effective. What they came back to us with is a recommendation this evening for an ordinance that would hold property owners or host individuals of parties and properties responsible for individuals that light off fireworks. So I'll let Chief Kaff's going to start off, and then Chief Zane will sort of conclude and touch on the highlights of what this ordinance will do and what it won't do for our community. We don't want to represent that it's going to solve this issue moving forward, but it's certainly a step in the right direction as we try to mitigate this impact. So Chief Kaff, would you like to sort of lead it off and walk the council through the ordinance and your assessment?
Thank you very much, Mr. City Manager. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. Chief Kaff here for those other folks that are watching. So tonight I'm going to talk mainly about what the ordinance is and the need for the change from the police department's perspective. As the city manager just stated, we have absolutely seen an increase over the years of increased illegal firework calls, primarily the aerial mortar fireworks in and around town. When we are responding to those types of calls, that prevents us from responding to other emergencies, other 911 calls that the police department and fire department is more appropriately used in. Just to give an idea of scope, over the 4th of July in the evening, we had a 6-hour time period where we had over 600 calls for service in 6 hours. On an average week, the police department responds to between 1,400 and 1,600 calls for service. But to have 600 calls in 6 hours, there's just no way. We're never going to have enough police officers or fire personnel to respond to all those calls. And that's why this ordinance is so gravely needed. So currently, the penal code requires that for an officer, they must actually witness somebody either holding the illegal firework or lighting it off before it goes up in the air to explode, before that officer can issue a citation making an arrest. Now, what this ordinance allows us to do is to shift that responsibility to the person responsible for the property, be that either an owner or the host of an event on the property, and hold them accountable through an administrative citation with a fine of $1,000. That's in line with what the other jurisdictions around California are using for their fine amount as well. Specifically, we reached out and took a look at the cities of Folsom and Sacramento. There's some regional partners here that we already have relationships with because we wanted to watch and see, is this effective? And is it a great burden on staff? The answer to both of those is yes. It did seem to be effective last year. It wasn't the silver bullet for solving all the problems, but it certainly made an impact. And it did not have a significant impact on staff. There is a lot of staff time that it does take up, but how we're proposing to do that this first year would be to utilize the police department's volunteers in policing program. We have a number of volunteers that currently review calls for service for identified vehicle registered owners from those complaints that we get about racing vehicles, speeding vehicles, and erratic driving. Then we send warning letters. This will be an additional duty for that crew. And now they're going to be doing the initial research for an officer to review. So that way we don't have to have the officer reviewing all the calls. Because even though over the 4th of July, we had 600 calls for service, we get these calls year round, especially around holidays. And we're hoping to have this ordinance in place before New Year's, which is our second highest day of the year where we experience the illegal firework calls. Now, I want to speak a little bit about our outreach. So the way this ordinance works is through tremendous public outreach, starting with tonight, starting with the reading of the ordinance, and then hopefully we'll get coverage in the Daily Democrat. We'll have a second reading at our next council meeting. And then we will be doing a social media campaign, utilizing all of the city's social media to advertise. But in addition, this problem, I'm not telling you anything you don't know. You probably have neighbors in your neighborhood where there's that house over there. They're the ones that are always lighting that off. And so we have been collecting a list of locations and addresses where we have received illegal firework complaints stemming from that location over the past year. They're all going to get a very specific letter so that they can be educated about the coming new ordinance and the potential for fines. So that way we can put them on notice. And the hope is that by educating the community, they'll change their behavior without us having to take enforcement action. So again, from the police department's perspective, this is definitely a needed ordinance. We've had the same fireworks ordinance for about 15 years now. It could be a little bit longer. And this is just an update because the landscape has changed. If we think about how fireworks were in town 15 years ago, it looked much different. And if we think about how it was this past 4th of July, we know we need to try something new. And with that, I'd like to ask Chief Eric Zane to kind of follow up and tell you a little bit more.
Chief Zane.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you, Chief Caff. Some pretty incredible statistics out there. $105 million in direct property damage are attributed to illegal fireworks on an annual basis. On the 4th of July, half of all fires reported in this nation are as a result of illegal fireworks. In 2020, there was an estimated 16,000 individuals hospitalized due to fireworks being, released in their presence. Nationwide, this is an issue. This is an issue that is continuing to, get worse. We're not the only community dealing with this. Several communities across our state are struggling with the same concerns. And Chief Caff mentioned it's very difficult to be at the right place at the right time to actually witness someone lighting these fireworks off. So this hosting ordinance will, change that burden and make it easier for us to hold individuals accountable. And it's just not the fire personnel or police department personnel that are going to be responsible for trying to find the individuals that are lighting up these fireworks. It is all of our responsibility. And the way we can do that is through the Safe and Sane Nail Them app. So essentially it is an application for your phone. It is iOS and Google Play, so Android compatible. The application, it does GPS location. You can add photos, you can add text, you can add audio, and essentially as soon as you hit submit, it sends that information to our jurisdiction and to the individuals that are out on the streets, boots on the ground, dealing with these calls for service, and our volunteers in policing that will be, following up on these ordinance violations. and it gives us, a tool to allow the citizens to help control the illegal fireworks in our community. So part of our outreach will be implementing and utilizing the Nail Them app as it's being utilized in several communities. One in particular, Manteca, they were able to identify 150 different locations through the use of this application. And I did notice that this evening, under our attendees is Mr. Dennis Revel, the principal of Revel Communications, who actually authored this application. So there might be some additional information that he can provide through public comment if he so chooses. But with that, I'll hand it back to you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Chief Zane, and thank you, Chief Caff. I can only say how grateful I am to have something to consider here to remediate the situation. This has been going on for years, and we all receive so many calls. Now, and the irony is we also all know people who get a big kick out of these illegal fireworks and set them off and think it's a jolly time and a lot of fun. But the fact is, it's not right to have fun at the expense of others. And the explosions are very disconcerting. We have people in our community who are a little less settled emotionally, and this is very disturbing to them. Certainly, probably every pet in town suffers terribly from these explosions going off. So thank you for bringing to us something to consider. Why don't we open it for public comment, and then we'll go to members of the council. If Mr. Revel would like to speak up, he's certainly welcome to do so. Mr. Revel? All right. If you're there, you gotta unmute yourself. I don't know if he's here or not. Madam Clerk, do you have others wishing to comment tonight publicly?
I'm here now.
Oh, there he is. There you go.
Mr. Revel, you have 3 minutes if you want to fill us in on your perspective on this.
Well, I want to compliment city staff and your police and fire chiefs for the staff report this evening. What they've given you is indeed a major step forward in your efforts to curb the use of illegal fireworks in your community, and used together with the NALM app that TNT Fireworks provides free of charge to not only the communities who use them, but the consumers who help in reporting the illegal fireworks use will go a long way to amplify the impact that you can have with the ordinance that is before you this evening.
Well, thank you again for your assistance as well as your perspective. Madam Clerk, is there anyone else from the public who wishes to be heard tonight on this issue?
No.
I find that a bit remarkable, but I'll take it. Now, colleagues, it's in our hands. I'm just going to let you go around. Councilmember Fernandez, do you have any concerns or questions on this issue?
Thank you, Mayor Stallard, and thank you to Chief Caff and Chief Zane for their presentation and the information that you provided. I guess the key here is that these are illegal fireworks. They're not about the safe and sane fireworks that we buy at our local nonprofit organization booth here in town. So just to reiterate the fact that there is a fine to the homeowner. I know I've received emails from residents who are concerned about the implication to homeowners being fined for maybe an activity that they're not necessarily involved in, or I think it puts the burden on them to regulate their guests if they're hosting an event. So I want to thank you for the time that you've taken and remind the residents of Woodland that it is about the safety of our community. It's about making sure that we're not implicating, as Mayor Stallard said earlier, the safety of others at the expense of our entertainment. They are illegal fireworks, and would just like to make our residents aware that it is implicating the safety of others when we conduct activities such as these. And so thank you for your time, and staff, thank you for the information that you've provided us.
Thank you, Councilmember Fernandez. Mayor Pro Tem Vega, any questions or concerns?
Sure. Thank you, Mayor Stallard. So, Chief Jane and Chief Kath, thank you so much for your presentation and for doing the research to see what's working out in other communities. Do you have one question around the app? I just did a quick search and I couldn't find it. Is it not available for download now?
No, I actually downloaded it today just to go over the app. So we will make sure that either through a QR code or some other ability to make sure that folks can easily find the app. And it's, it is, we're able to find it. So I can also send an email out to council with the link so you can kind of get a feel for what the application looks like.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, that'd be great. So we can start sharing that and get it out.
Absolutely.
That'll be all, Mayor Stallard. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Vega. Councilmember Tanya Garcia Cadena. Questions or comments on this issue?
Thank you. Sorry, I was having problems unmuting. Yeah, so I'm actually really looking forward to this. Just a few years back, so my area of town over here is very well known for the aerial fireworks. And just a few years back, we were at my parents' house, which is very near my home, and illegal fireworks were going off, and it set the tree off, on fire that was across the street. And there were people sitting directly under where this was happening. And it was just really a scary situation. And, fire department, thank goodness, was able to get there and get it put out. But 10 minutes later, they were back at it again. And so I think an ordinance like this is very much needed. And I have the feeling that the education that goes along with this is going to really curb the use of illegal fireworks. And I really appreciate the work that's gone into it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Garcia Cadena. Councilmember Landsberg.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you to Chief Kath and Chief Mustache. One of the things that I wanted to look at was the app itself. Am I correct that the app is live during, say, 4th of July, and that boots on the ground would get an instant referral rather than going through the 5 to 7 minute process at dispatch?
Yes, thank you, Councilmember Landsberg. So the app does have a back end portion of the app where it's, particular individuals that are able to log in will get to see the real time data being pushed from the residents to the application. And some jurisdictions have that sent to their dispatch, whereas other jurisdictions choose to have that sent to, their officers or battalion chiefs or personnel that are on duty at that time. So I think that'll be a work in progress with Chief Kath and I to figure out the best methodology on how to ensure that we're getting the information out to the field, and then also reconciling that for use within the ordinance. But yes, there will be real-time data available to personnel in the field.
I would encourage the two chiefs to get together and maybe come up with a pilot program with a couple of the officers and fire officers to do real-time responses. You know how long it takes with 600 calls to dispatch in 6 hours. Those calls aren't going to go out in a timely manner. That's a given. So thank you for that. I encourage you to look at that. While this ordinance is a good start, Mr. Mayor, I think we need to use all the tools available to both the fire department and the police department. There are additional tools that haven't been mentioned tonight, specifically simple possession of one of these bombs, and that's what they are, they're bombs, is a crime in and of itself. So hopefully we'll train our staffs to recognize these devices and take enforcement action on any individual who thinks it's okay and cool to possess these illegal fireworks. Besides being dangerous, these bombs scare senior citizens, they scare children and pets. We need to be firm in our position and enforce every possible statute to hold these nuisance individuals accountable, no matter where they are and who they are. And the reason I say that, no matter who they are, we know that there are some well-heeled people that $1,000 isn't going to mean beans to them. But we need to hold those individuals accountable. That this is not, while it's fun for themselves, find another location to do it, not in the city of Woodland. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
And thank you, Councilmember Landsberg. I think the council's made its feelings pretty clear on this issue. Is there anything more from staff on this before we move forward to vote? Not hearing it. And Madam Clerk, nothing more from the public?
No.
All right. Who would like the pleasure of making the motion on this item?
Before we make a motion, Mayor Stallard, it's Councilmember Fernandez again.
Yes.
Just want to clarify before we move on. The app, will that be the only manner in which they're reported, or will there be other methods of reporting the activity?
I believe I can answer that. Chief Caff here. Yeah, so we imagine is this is going to take some time, and that's what Folsom and Sacramento noticed as well. And so they didn't change their response models. You know, the officers, the fire personnel, they are still responding to those calls that they do get through dispatch. In addition, we do receive occasionally tips in our anonymous tip line. You can go to woodlandpolice.org, and under one of the reporting options there is to report a crime anonymously. And so we follow up on those as well. So we use all the traditional ways of receiving this information. But in addition to that, now we have this app, which some members of the community may be more comfortable using.
Okay, thank you. And again, I just want to maybe clarify that, because I just don't know if there will be certain neighbors who may call in or report versus other areas that may not be willing to report their neighbors. So just in order to address the issue, I guess, more thoroughly, making sure that we still have officers on the ground or avenues for people who may not be willing to report the illegal activity. Thank you.
You know, as Vicki made me think about something, and that is, I don't know how the app works, but I think it'd be great if we had a map of the city. And so all the reports, we can see where the hotspots are by where all the reports are coming in, and more effectively deploy our troops to areas where we can truly interdict the behavior, because it's happening in such concentrated numbers in certain places. Is that part of what the thinking is, Chief Caff?
Yes, and you know what? We've actually been doing that for years. We have that information internally. We worked with the city IT department, and they have some really talented GIS specialists that allow us to plot the calls for service in the different areas. And then that goes to our crime analysis unit. We look at the past years and try and predict which locations have parties on which nights, so that we can then be in the right area and hopefully catching somebody holding the firework. But now with this new ordinance, we'll be able to just make sure that the firework was coming from that location and hold that host responsible.
Thank you, Chief. All right. Is there further discussion?
One more thing, Mr. Mayor.
Please proceed.
You know, I think this app is pretty important, and I'm glad we're going to have another tool for our community to use. And I hope that between the police department and the fire department, that there's some training involved with the public on how to use this thing. Maybe the neighborhood watch folks could be helpful in that regard. Some community forums on how to use the darn thing. Encourage you to do that. Other than that, Mr. Mayor, that's all.
You know, Rich, I think you actually have the seeds of a great idea, just saying, why don't we get the neighborhood watch organization engaged in identifying this too? And what we have to do is help the community understand that this is not acceptable behavior. It's not funny, you know, it's not ha-ha. It's serious misconduct. It truly hurts others, and we want to stop it. So this ordinance, I think, is a good place to start. I'm ready to entertain a motion from any member of the council.
Motion by Landsberg.
A second.
Second.
Motion by Landsberg, second by Mayor Pro Tem Vega. That's what I think I heard. All right, further discussion, there being none. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Mayor Pro Tem Vega,
Aye.
Councilmember Fernandez,
Aye.
Councilmember Garcia Cadena,
Aye.
Councilmember Landsberg,
Aye.
Mayor Stallard.
Aye. Thank you. Thank you. This is really, hopefully, a step in the direction of progress in reducing this behavior. All right, that takes us to our concluding item of the evening. Item 9, this is the American Rescue Act Spending Plan, ARP as we call it. This is how we have to decide how to spend the federal monies given to our city. Mr. Manager, would you like to lead off on this?
Yeah, once again, I'll do an introduction and then hand it over to Kim McKinney to walk the council through the spending plan that we've been working on with the council subcommittee over the past several months. Just a real quick sort of background reset. As the mayor indicated, the American Rescue Plan funding is funding that was provided by the federal government and distributed to all the cities and the counties throughout the country based on allocation of community development block grant funding. The city allocation of that equates to $11.1 million, for which we will receive that funding in two different increments. The first, which was received earlier this year in the amount of $5.5 million, and the balance will be distributed next May, we believe. The parameters around the funding are pretty specific, and the Treasury has continued to provide clarity and guidance around the parameters. But pretty simply, the funds must be committed no later than December 31st of 2024, with expenditure occurring by December 31st, 2026. So we do have a little bit of time to be thoughtful about how to best invest these funds in our community. The guidance also provides some restrictions around how the funds can be used. Again, the federal government provided those restrictions, and general categories include public health emergency response, premium pay for certain employees, government services affected by revenue during the pandemic, as well as investments in capital infrastructure such as water, sewer, broadband. So with that context, the council has had a few updates on our process, the most recent one being in August 17th of this year, where we provided 5 key funding categories for the council to consider. Again, these were informed by conversations with the council subcommittee, the mayor pro tem. The council at that August 17th meeting confirmed these funding categories, which include revenue recovery, which would restore eligible funding to the city's general fund budget that then have to be committed to public services. Second category was responding to the public health crisis around COVID-19, and that can include mental health and wellness services, improved air quality at public facilities, and also include investment in technologies to improve emergency response capabilities. Thirdly, the negative impacts felt by COVID on our business community were significant. So the council included business recovery programs and workforce training skills as a possible funding allocation. Fourthly, youth services and childcare was a consistent theme throughout the community, and the council included this category specifically to target how to build our capabilities in our community around childcare services. Could include facilities as well as programs for youth of all ages. And then lastly, infrastructure. So we have infrastructure needs certainly in this community that are unfunded. And so council asked us to evaluate some of those infrastructure needs, particularly around the water and stormwater utilities, to identify projects that would be eligible for funding and avoid potential need to ask taxpayers for additional taxes to fund these, since these are one-time funding allocations from the federal government. There's a unique opportunity here to take those dollars and invest them in unfunded infrastructure. So with that, the council also gave us direction at that August 17th meeting to launch a community survey to get feedback from the community around these 5 key categories, which Kim will walk you through that survey process and the results here on the screen. You also encouraged us to continue to collaborate with our local partners, both at the county, school districts, as well as nonprofit organizations in the community. And we've had pretty significant projects identified, as well as opportunities for us to leverage the investments that we'll be recommending in partnership with those organizations and with the county. And then bring back to the council in this time frame a more detailed spending plan with identified projects for us to then move forward into implementation phase. And so I'll have Kim sort of touch on the survey process, the results that we received from the community, how that fed into the proposed spending plan that's before you this evening, and where we go from here after this evening's presentation and council direction.
Great, thank you. As Ken mentioned, we, after the last meeting, received direction and developed a input survey to send out to the community, which was marketed or published on September 15th, primarily through social media platforms. And we had it open and received responses through October 15th. We received 241 responses to the survey, and the folks who took the survey were asked to rank the 5 categories, and different points were assigned based on the higher the rank, the higher the points that were given, and then cumulative scores added up. And you can see on the chart up here what the total number of points added up to for each of these categories of the 241 responses. And then also included kind of lower on the bars there is how many of these respondents picked that particular category as their top choice or their highest level of priority for the 5 areas of funding that were included in the survey. Also included with the staff report, attached to it was a sample of the survey that was sent out. It looked different online, but included the information that was asked, and also a summary of what the responses were received. In that survey, we also asked for the respondents to include or to respond to their income levels, as well as their whether they were Hispanic or not, were the 2 questions we asked to try to gauge what type of input we were receiving from the community. And the responses that we received also, again, are highlighted in the attachment to the staff report, but we feel like are representative of the community. And as you can see on the chart here, there really was no clear winners or losers. That it shows that there was general support for each of the categories listed, in that we and that there's a support for allocating investment in each of those areas. So also included in the staff report on the screen here is a preliminary allocation of funds for the ARP spending plan. As with all other spending plans that we do, primarily those that are for our sales tax measures, these are kind of a living document. Things change all the time, and we will continue to come back and update them. But for right now, the categories, again, that we just spoke about, the 5 are listed on the left side under expenditures here. We know what our revenues are going to be. Those won't change. But the expenditure categories potentially could, but we feel pretty good about where we are here, other than there's some unallocated money that we'll get to in a moment. So the revenue recovery line item, there's a specific calculation that we're allowed to go through defined by the Treasury, and how do we calculate what revenue we lost as a result of COVID, and how much would we be allowed to recover through ARP money. That calculation we can continue to do for another year after this, or actually 2 years almost. We've done the first calculation, and we've shown that the city of Woodland could recover $4.7 million in revenues that we lost as a result of COVID. We've included $3.5 million on here, and that money essentially gets reimbursed back to the general fund to fill the revenue that was lost. And we'll have a separate discussion about that actual revenue recovery at another meeting, more in line with the budget when we're talking specifically about the general fund later. Responding to the COVID-19 public health crisis, we've allocated $2.15 million and just under 20% of the total allocation of funds on here. We'll talk more about each of these categories in a second. The negative economic impacts, we have $200,000 as a placeholder in here. Youth services and childcare, right now we showed just under $1.15 million. And the asterisk there stating that we have still $1.2 million of money that we have not allocated to a specific category under this spending plan. Our intention is that the vast majority or all of the unallocated balance will be prioritized to this youth services and childcare category. And when that money is added to that, it would be about 20% of the total for the ARP funds as well. And then the final category of infrastructure, we have just under $2.9 million allocated in this category. I'm not going to go through every single item that was discussed in the staff report, just highlight a couple of areas here under revenue recovery. I mentioned already that we essentially reimburse the general fund and are able to use that money for general government services. And we'll have more lengthy discussion about the general fund and its revenues and reserves at another meeting. Under the responding to the COVID-19 health crisis, this covers a myriad of areas under the legislation, and it allows for funding for different ways to respond to the COVID-19 crisis, including direct response to medical, but also there was a recognition that the impacts aren't only on the medical area of COVID, but that there was significant impact on mental health as well as a result of COVID. And so the largest allocation under this category that we've included is towards the Crisis Now mental health intervention program. And this is one of the areas that we would be and are collaborating with other agencies within the county to have a significant regional program that we believe will be very important. And we also have talked to council about this in past and received direction specifically to include this program in the allocation, and we have done so. Under the negative impacts of COVID, as Ken mentioned before, there were significant impacts to businesses as a result of COVID. There was significant funding allocated from the federal government and from the state through the CARES Act, also through ARP. There were other funding programs that are better suited to address a lot of the needs specifically for businesses. But we do recognize that businesses still have ongoing impact, and we have an interest in finding ways to assist them. And so we have a placeholder of funding here, but do need to have some additional conversations and work around specific development of programs aimed to provide assistance primarily geared towards local small businesses that continue to be impacted by COVID. So there definitely will be more to follow here. Under the youth services and childcare category, again, this is one of the areas, or the area we probably have the most collaboration with other agencies, with the county, with the other cities in the county, with Iola County Office of Education. And there are a number of programs and projects that are listed in the staff report, including having a youth center with the Boys and Girls Club of America, additional support for a child care network with the Iola County Office of Education, the First 5 Welcome Baby program, and expanded hours at the city youth summer programs. There also is additional work, like we mentioned, to be done here, and unallocated money in the plan that we intend to include in this category once we've worked out some more details and funding with some other agencies, and those are listed also in the staff report. And then finally, the infrastructure category, the city does have significant obligations that are unfunded, and especially in the stormwater area, our stormwater fees have been unchanged since the early 90s. They're 48 cents a month for residential accounts, and any major projects that we have to do become an obligation of the general fund. And so the majority of the infrastructure money that we've programmed in this spending plan is towards stormwater projects, and that's about $2.9 million. So that kind of is a quick overview. I didn't want to read the entire staff report to you again, but as I mentioned, this is a sort of iterative, living, breathing process that we'll continue to go through and return to council when we have more details.
Thank you very much, Kimberly. And as mentioned, there was a council subcommittee composed of Mayor Pro Tem Vega and myself. We've had at least 3 meetings over this, and I think the staff report appropriately reflects the discussion we had. Mayor Pro Tem Vega, do you have any comments you wish to add to the discussion on this? You're muted. You're muted, Myra.
Oh, sorry about that. So yes, I'll chime in with some comments. I just really appreciate Kim and Evie's and all of the work that they have put together to support our subcommittee. And as we're discussing different options for investing these funds in our community, I also just wanted to recognize the work that Spencer did to put together the survey and including it in Spanish. I'm disappointed to see how we don't have a response that matches up with what the makeup of our community, but I think we have some work to do, and I'm looking forward to continue to engage the Latino community to get more involvement, particularly in these areas that could help the community overcome the pandemic. Other than that, I think, Kim, to your point, it's an iterative process. I continue to get some community members or small businesses that reach out to ask about this process. And some thoughts and ideas. So this is something certainly that's top of mind with our community. So that'll be all, Mayor Seller. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Vega. As the other member of the subcommittee, I share every comment that you have made. I also would like to mention that the Yolo County ARP allocation is something around $62 million. So there's many nonprofits and social service agencies that are seeking assistance. And thankfully, Yolo County is considering a small grant program with some of their ARP money. So any nonprofit throughout Yolo County can consider that as a possible source for help. Fellow members of the council, anyone else wish to speak up on this issue? This is an update. There's no action other than receiving the staff report and providing council direction. Is there any additional direction that any member of the council wishes to propose?
Councilmember Hernandez. Thank you, Mayor Stallard. I had this discussion earlier with Ken, and I just wanted to reiterate the concern for participation in the process. And again, the survey is reflective of 241 residents in the city of Woodland of 61,000 residents. So finding a way to make sure that we have input from residents would be a top priority. So we have civic engagement in the process that we're asking residents to give their input on how we spend these funds. That's one concern. Also received emails from residents who are concerned about the process of the survey, requesting that every resident receive a copy of the survey in their bill, asking that the survey is really not reflective of the residents of Woodland because we have such a small percentage of participation. So they have stated that it's more of a closed survey and they'd like to see this process started over. Have participation by giving every resident a copy of the survey. So just want to share that information because it is something that has been addressed by residents who believe that it's not completely reflective of everyone's. Again, we can't force people to participate in a survey, but I just want you to know that that is a concern of some members. Secondly, based on the survey that was presented and the information gathered, my question is and continues to be that it doesn't reflect the proportionate amount of allocation to the different programs. If we're saying that all 5 areas were pretty generally of concern for the 241 residents who participated, yet the allocation for city revenue is at 32%. And the impacts of COVID, I realize that you said there's state funding, but 2%, if we're saying that all 5 areas were of the same priority, that 2% of our funding being allocated to one item does not reflect the concerns of our residents. 10% for our youth services, again, we're assuming that an additional million will be input into or allocated into that area, which would bring it at 20%. Yet I believe that's one of the higher concerns based on your survey or the city survey. And yet revenues is getting 32%. So just want to have it noted that if we're going to use the survey as a process to give us direction, that perhaps our allocation should be reflective of that. So I don't see that the same amount or same value is placed on the financial allocations if we're saying that we're looking at the survey results. So just want to make note of that, that perhaps we need to examine how we can provide perhaps more support for community members or residents so that it's not going completely where a majority of the funding is going back into the city revenue. And at this point, it looks like that's where the majority of the funding is going is towards city revenue recovery, where I think that maybe we need to examine how we are directly impacting the lives of residents in our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Fernandez. I'm going to respectfully disagree with many of the things you've said. As far as I'm concerned, a 241 response is a fairly good response on a survey. When it tracks so consistently across all subject areas, I think that indicates that all of them are important to our citizens. And I think probably if we had a much bigger number, I don't know if there'd be a great deal of change. Also, I didn't see this as necessarily dividing up the money 20%, 20%, 20%, but rather dealing with all 5 topics. Some topics are more costly than others. Infrastructure is very costly. And stormwater evacuation from the city is pretty important to the safety and well-being of our citizens. And if we don't take advantage of this opportunity to use some of these funds to do these major improvements, it's going to have to come back on the citizens another way. And the monies we've lost in consequence of COVID affect our ability to fund our city. And we're here with a fiduciary obligation to protect our city. So I feel the process has been very well done. I think the staff work has been excellent, and I'm comfortable with the state of the recommendations at this point, but I know there's more refinement yet to come. Does any other council member wish to be heard on this?
Council Member Garcia Cadena, I just have just a couple questions. First off, I'm assuming that the questionnaire was meant for adults only to complete, right? We were looking for adults. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. And then secondly, I think it's a positive for the city that 282 of the people who completed the survey have an income less than $50,000 annual income. So I think we are reaching a wide range of people. That was something I was concerned about, that maybe some of our lower income community members might not participate, but that's not what I see at all on this. So I do appreciate that we do have a variety of our community members participating.
Thank you, Councilmember Garcia Cadena. Additional comment?
Mayor Stollard, I just want to add one more thing, if I may.
Please.
So I just wanted to highlight the fact that some of these, Councilmember Fernandez, the youth services and childcare area, there's a lot of matching funds that are being deployed here. So I hear you, what you're saying, childcare services, we've heard from many of our community members is a significant struggle. So something that I think is really, really positive that we're doing is that amount, 1.1 million, is really probably can multiply that, add a multiplier, because we are leveraging some of the county's funds. So I think as a proportion that gets much larger, but I hear your concern. I just wanted to call that out because I think that that's important. That raises the percentage that's being invested if we're looking at all of those areas. So I want to continue to have those conversations. I think if we can go into a matching funds to more holistically fund a project, we should continue to do that. That'll be all, Mayor Stollard. Thank you.
And thank you for that important clarification. Also, we are soliciting more interest in childcare options. And right now, we're happy to hear from people, and who knows what we might be able to come up with. Some of these are coming from private childcare providers who want to expand operations, for example.
I just want to add, Mayor Stollard, I'm quite aware of all the resources and collaborations that are going on within the county, but I just wanted to note that it looks and it gives the appearance that we are not dividing it as equally as our survey indicated. And that was my only concern, is that if we're saying they are all of equal importance, that our allocations should maybe reflect that a little more closely than they are. And I'm quite aware of all the discussions that we've had with the county. So I appreciate the follow-up on that, but I just wanted to make a note of that. And again, I am advocating for the residents who did have some concern about the process. So just wanted to provide that information. I think it's important that we acknowledge the information that we get from our residents. So thank you.
I certainly agree with you. All right. Any concluding comments, or shall we consider this discussion finished for today, but ready to resume at another meeting? All right. Thank you again, staff. I know many, many hours have gone into this, and probably many more hours will go into this before we're done. We'll look forward to the next update. Okay. That brings us to adjournment. I want to adjourn tonight in memory of Norm Calloway. Norm retired here, a Methodist pastor, and became a very engaged member of our city, working on so many different nonprofits. A truly genial and lovely person who made a real difference while he was here. And I also want to note tonight, I believe it is 1 year since election night from 2020, when 2 members of our council joined us. And we're so glad to have them. And just a couple of months later, a third got to join us. And I'm just grateful for the privilege of serving with all of you. I want to say that, I mean it. We are now concluded for tonight. We'll be back in 2 weeks, Tuesday, November 16th at 6 p.m. And unless anyone has any comments, we'll adjourn. Comments?
Mayor Stollard, thank you so much. And I appreciate it and enjoy working with you. Thank you.
Thank you all. All right. Good night, everyone.
Bye.
Good night.